Hello, everyone. I'm Namira Salim, the founder and executive chairperson of Space Trust. Welcome. It's my privilege to co-chair today's GNF with Eric Stallmer, president of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, and I'm honored to welcome our distinguished panel. Space Trust was launched in 2015, and its lead initiative, Zero G Summit or Zero Gravity Summit, advocates space as the new frontier for peace on Earth before world leaders, governments, and leaders of the global space industry in support of Space 2030 and the UN Sustainable Development Agenda of 2030. Accordingly, I trust that today's discussion will inspire and provide insights into mankind's return to the moon in our new space age via public-private partnerships and international cooperation not only between spacefaring nations, but also between emerging space nations for creating an international base on the moon and on Mars comprised of interplanetary ambassadors who, amongst other milestones, would utilize low Earth orbit and the cis-lunar gateway for sustainable peace on Earth via increased international cooperation. On that note, and to inspire mankind's return to the moon, I would now like to play a teaser of Follow Me to the Moon, which is a song I wrote and sang, and which in partnership with IAF will be unveiled during the closing ceremony of IAC and launched on digital platforms globally on Thursday, October 24th. Thank you. Follow me to the
Men from planet Earth set foot upon the moon. They came in peace for all time. They saw the Earth rise on its throne and made a giant leap for mankind. Follow me to the moon. See the earth rise, one world in a million, blue jewel in the sky. Follow me to the moon. Follow me to the moon. Follow me.
Okay, so now I would like to give the floor. Thank you. I hope that'll inspire everyone to go back to the moon. I'd like to now give the floor to Eric Stallmer for starting our panel here with the distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Namira. It's a beautiful song, really touching and inspiring. We have a really great crew today here to wrap up the day. And for the benefit of all you being out here at 5:45 before the reception, drinks are on us after this panel. So again, thank you everyone for being here. What we really want to talk today about is mankind, or really humankind's return to the moon in this new era, because the era is really changing. Our science, our technology, our policy, it's all evolving at a rapid rate. And we really have four experts here on the stage today to discuss where we're going with the policy area, with the partnerships area, from an international perspective, and also from a business perspective. So I think it should be pretty exciting. We have Margaret Kiefer here from NASA. Margaret's the director of the Export Control and Interagency Division over at NASA. Bob Richards is the founder, Bob's right there, I skipped over Kevin, but not really. Bob Richards, founder and CEO of Moon Express. Kevin O'Connell, who's the director of the Office of Space Commerce over at the Department of Commerce. And Kevin coming off the heels of a great event earlier this morning, helping the entrepreneurs and the startup space. And then finally, at the end, we have Ryan Whitley, who's the director of civil policy over at the National Space Council. And I'll add also, Ryan, you had a great event today. The National Space Council just wrapped up its user advisory group, and we had a meeting all day this afternoon that I think we really hammered through a lot of great ideas and some findings and recommendations that are going to be really useful to all of us as we move forward. So what I would like, if just to a little more formally introduce everyone and what their office is doing, if we could just Ryan, give a 1-minute commercial on what's going on in your office. I think it'll go hot once you go hot. So what your office is doing, what you're excited about, and some of the things you're working on.
All right, try this one. All right, that's better. Thanks, Eric. So the Space Council, as I think most of us know now, is new again after being in hiatus for a long time. And the Space Council performs the role of space policy direction for the administration. What formerly was housed primarily in a few other policy offices like the OSTP, Office of Science Technology Policy, National Security Council. All space issues are wrapped into the Space Council. And as you heard from this morning, Vice President Mike Pence is the chairman of that, and there are multiple secretaries from the cabinet who are on the council. So basically what happens is the Space Council works through policy issues and issues space policy directives. The one that folks hear about a lot is the first one that came out in late 2017, and that really is the foundational directive for human spaceflight in particular, and one that's relevant to this topic about returning to the moon and going to Mars. So those space policy directives are one function of what the Space Council does. It also organizes cross-agency activities, trying to make sure the interagency is collaborating and working together properly. So we have directors. I'm the director of civil space. We have a director of commercial space and a director of defense space. And we all share the same office space to work through issues that have shared interests and shared goals, all tied to the space issues. So that's what we attempt to do is put together the policy for the administration so it's all cohesive and cogent.
Great. Bob, give us the entrepreneurial perspective.
So thank you, Eric. I think first maybe the larger perspective of what drives me as an entrepreneur is really to help humanity evolve out into space as a responsible species to transcend our adolescence on this planet and embrace the moon as a stepping stone towards Mars and other places, but to look to other continents. As an entrepreneur, I'm focused on the business aspects right now, but passionately, I want the species to really be able to evolve from a socio-political, from an economic, from a philosophical perspective. So as we evolve as a species out into space, we become a multi-world species that's responsible. And we learn how to utilize space as a new platform for international peace. Economics and entrepreneurship and finding the sustainable ways where business and government can work together, together with people and democratizing access to space is a role that business can play in a responsible way. And as we go to the moon with Moon Express and others, it's very important what we do in these first few footsteps on the moon because we're setting the precedents that will have ripples in the future for all time to come. So it's very important that we get it right as we go up back to the moon or forward to the moon with all of humanity.
Kevin, there's a lot of excitement about your office. It was, dare I say, a little dormant for a few years, and you really have reinvigorated it in just a remarkable way. Tell us some of the things that your office is doing. I highlighted a little bit today, the conference you guys have, if you want to highlight that, but just some of the other exciting things that are going on over at Department of Commerce.
Sure, thank you, Eric. Thankful to be here this afternoon. You're right, people often congratulate me on being the director of the new Office of Space Commerce, but in fact it dates back to the Reagan administration when commercialization was largely a twinkle of folks' imagination, mostly around launch in those days. But today there's a much, much stronger case for why we need to focus on commercialization from the economic and commercial perspective. What we've been spending a lot of time on, our duties are to foster the conditions for economic growth and technological advancement of the U.S. commercial space industry, and we've really been using 4 approaches to deal with that. The first is advocacy overall. Today we held the 4th summit that was sponsored by the Secretary at the Department. Today's was on the unique challenges of small business startups. Second is on what I'll call modernizing regulation. This is where we work the mandates of SPDs 3, streamlining the commercial use of space, and SPD 2, streamlining commercial use of space, and SPD 3 on space traffic management. The third is on industry engagement, and I think when we look at exploration, it's really important, given how much dynamic change there is in the market, to actually follow companies that show up. I like to say, some of you have heard me say this before, we see entrepreneurs every single week at the Commerce Department. Some are from large companies, some are from medium companies, and some look like they've been in a garage without food for the last 10 weeks. And we love all those entrepreneurs as they come forward in the market to actually pay attention to the kinds of capabilities that they are offering. There's still sometimes a disbelief in government that something can happen or happen as fast as entrepreneurs think it can. So it's important to sort of pay attention to who's coming forward in the market, either for, as we discussed at Commerce this morning, the use case perspective, the possibility that the government could make a small investment and invest toward its own purposes, even as a company pursues commercialization, or for other reasons. The last thing we've been spending a lot of time on recently is improving our understanding of the global space economy. You all have heard the projections, $400 billion global space economy today, estimates to between $1 and $3 trillion over the next 20 years. We're trying to make sure that as we account for activities in the space economy, we're doing it in a more rigorous way. There's lots of reasons why those are softer numbers today than they might be. I'm happy to talk about that in more detail. But those are essentially the 4 lanes that we've been working in the office as we pursue the revitalization of this office.
Okay, great, thank you so much. Margaret, exciting times at NASA. Artemis, you have on the horizon, you have the commercial crew coming online, and again, returning humans back to the moon, the first woman back to the moon. Tell me about some of the excitement that you're seeing at NASA right now.
Of course, I'm happy to. And just for context, you're kind enough to give my title, but my office overall, that includes, speaking of lines of business, international and interagency partnerships, which is also space policy. So we work very closely with the Space Council and the Security Council to implement the direction that we received in Space Policy Directive 1, and of course the fairly recent, March of this year, mandate we got from the Vice President, which is very exciting, and it's getting the first woman and next man to the moon by 2024. And that's kind of a very helpful acceleration of our plan. It gets us laser focused on the task at hand, and it also highlights for us some key components that are in Space Policy Directive 1, and that is to achieve that objective in partnership with commercial and international. It's not something we can do by ourselves. NASA has a long history of commercial and international partnerships. We have about 700 international partnerships that are active right now, and about, it depends on the year, but anywhere from 70 to 75% of our budget does go to commercial entities. So it's something we're skilled at, we're excited about. It's an interesting time to be here. I started with NASA, if you'll indulge me, in 1988, and again, although it's part of our DNA to collaborate with our international commercial partners, it is different this time. There's a lot more emphasis on new space and entrepreneurs that see the advantage and the economic benefit of putting their own skin in the game. This term public-private partnerships, PPPs, it's essential to what we're trying to do. And it's downright exciting. Thank you.
Margaret, you hit a great point. I want to kind of loop back with you and Kevin on this real quickly. It's not lost on me, of course, that we're in Washington, so we have 3 representatives, from government agencies. But as we sit on the stage today, we're here at the International Astronaut Federation, and representatives from, I think, about 150 countries are here, and scores of space agencies. So how can the moon be used to benefit international collaboration, whether from NASA or Commerce? How do you see the benefit of moon exploration enabling that?
So we think partnerships are an essential part of getting back to the moon, in addition to many other areas of commerce. Some of you attended the Space Enterprise Summit that we ran, State and Commerce, back in June, and that was really all about the nature of partnerships going forward, government-to-government partnerships, government-to-industry, and purely commercial. And so even here at IAC, we're having discussions with partners about different ways they think about the market, different approaches to regulation. Obviously, this is a commerce perspective, and what they see as the essential ingredients of a partnership, either for a moon mission or for a broader set of missions that are going to inform the movement toward $1 trillion space economy.
The only thing I would add is just, again, from sort of a longer term perspective, there was so much pent up interest and excitement around the world in going to the moon. You know, NASA, we always had that as an objective, even while we were looking primarily at an asteroid. But when we came back around to the moon, it was the right thing to do. It clicked with everybody. There just was a lot of anticipation about the moon for all the right reasons. I mean, it really is, and not only just to go there to have humans visit there, but to do it sustainably in anticipation of human exploration of Mars, which is a pretty daunting undertaking when you think about it from a technical capability and just human health standpoint. But doing a sustainable effort on the lunar surface gives us the skill set to get there, just like ISS, the International Space Station, was the proving ground for what we're going to do on the moon.
Thanks so much. Ryan, I don't think it was a coincidence that the first space policy directive to come from the president was about exploration, about going to the moon and beyond. How does returning humans to the moon what does that bring to the American taxpayer from a administration perspective and a value added?
Yeah, so you know, in terms of the economic benefit, I mean, there's lots of ways to look at the benefit to the taxpayer. So we know that there are both, you know, the intangibles that come from the inspiration. In fact, you know, you could argue that the real reason we explore is because, like Margaret said, it's in our DNA to do so. But there are tangible benefits, and sometimes those are hard to quantify. You know, if we rewind the clock and think about what we had before the Apollo program and look at what we had after the Apollo program, there's a market change, right? There's a clear difference that occurred, and we can't really predict exactly how those things will return. But the goal then is how that return on the investment pays off to the American taxpayer, and that is the goal, I think, to bring, you know, the topic of du jour in the play here is new space, this idea of having multiple players be part of that endeavor. So, you know, you might say that in the past, it was limited to, you know, government and government-only funded projects, and they owned it, right? But now we're opening it up to multiple entities, private companies, and we're investing in those companies to succeed, and that benefits not only those companies, but all the people who use those services. I mean, we can think of all the services, technological breakthroughs that have occurred, all the new tech that we have in our lives today, but really it is that benefit of those opportunities that now are created for the private person. So one day maybe we'll have space tourists, but until that time we'll have companies, you know, thriving in this new economy. So there are multiple flavors of how that can exist. There's also the opportunity for scientific discovery. I mean, the benefit to the taxpayer, it goes beyond just the economic benefit, but it is the one that I think that is most tangible that we need to be aware of and prioritize going forward, and to make things more affordable and sustainable in that way.
And Bob, as the entrepreneur, you had a lot of options, a lot of different business lines to go into. What drove you to the moon? What are you seeing as the long-term prospects for your company and others, really?
So, driven by markets, you know, our concept of the world is defined by technology and inevitably the transportation able to get there. So our early concepts of the world were limited to tribes and tribes next door, and then maritime technology allowed us to trade with other tribes, and then deep space, deep ocean, and then deep space vessels allowed us to trade with other continents. And now we have a new continent that we can trade with called the moon. If we think of space like the ocean that we need to cross and the moon as the 8th continent, the way that business opportunities arise is you need to be as close to your markets as possible. So the farther you are away from the credit cards, the less likely there is a business case. Likely Mars, which is a wonderful place to be, is at the raggedy edge of possibility for entrepreneurial activities, but not for governments. It's a great place at the edges of exploration. The moon is right next door to Earth. And within light seconds, within access of now exponential technologies reducing the cost of access to the moon, with entrepreneurial companies developing a rocketry that could bring other entrepreneurs to the ocean of space to access the moon. The moon is the place to be. It's the next stepping stone. It's close enough to the economies of Earth and to the inflection point of humanity's expansion into space. It intersects both. So it's absolutely the next logical place for governments and the private sector to work together and to push the boundaries not just of economics and entrepreneurship, but policy and law. And I look at Margaret because we worked together with NASA back in 2016 and the White House and had to blaze a trail through policy to allow entrepreneurship to even happen beyond traditional Earth orbit. So the moon is a stepping stone that's close enough that can push the boundaries that will set the precedence for the exploration of the rest of the solar system.
Absolutely.
As we see entrepreneurs come across our doorstep at Commerce, the operative word in Space Policy Directive 1 is sustainably. Because what we see entrepreneurs thinking about is how will we train people who will live on the moon for longer periods of time? How will we feed people who are going to be on the moon for longer periods of time? How will we train them how the experience that they have in their normal work activities on Earth are different in space? And so we see already in the market here on Earth a number of companies coming forward that are thinking actively about that. But the word sustainably is the key word as we think about the return to the moon.
We had a special treat this summer here in Washington, but really all over the world, where the National Air and Space Museum here on the lawn projected the Apollo launch vehicle and told the story of 50 years ago. Because when you look around the room now at a lot of these space conferences, the vast majority of the population in the room was not around for the Apollo era. And the Apollo era and the race to the moon was a much different time. There was international threats. It was an adversarial relationship. It was government versus government. Now we're looking at a new opportunity here with the peaceful exploration of space and international partners. What's the critical components from your different agencies on reaching out to these international partners? And not just the international partners, but also international companies that are doing this work to go back to the moon.
I'll just start by offering a few thoughts, leveraging off on the sustainability and open architecture. So everybody's very familiar with NASA's program. We now are calling the moon part of it Artemis, but Gateway and our efforts to explore further into space and to the moon has been around for several years, and we have been advocating and working with our international partners to see where we could collaborate together. And another key component is the sustainability, which is really leveraging the international. If you look at the whole picture of exploring the moon, both robotically and with humans, NASA's just one small part of that, and that's by design. The intention is to create an open architecture that industry and entrepreneurs can leverage for their own purposes. So I just want to really strongly make that point because it really is encouraging everybody to either partner with NASA, but also partner with others within the international and commercial community. It really accommodates all flavors of partnership.
I'll use a line that when we talk to our partners, we talk broadly about the space economy, but I think it applies here with the case of the moon as well. And it is that when countries think about pursuits in space, they are still traditionally thinking a lot about old-fashioned notions. So we will have folks come to us and say, hey, Kevin, we have a world-class technical university that can participate here, or we have a piece of geography that we think is pertinent to some aspect of pursuit of space. And our answer is you really have to think about a much larger circle as we pursue the return to the moon, but as we pursue this larger space economy. We're going to need a very wide range of talent that goes well beyond the technical skills. And certainly we're going to need all the technical skills that we can get, but we're going to need doctors, and we're going to need lawyers, and we're going to need business case developers, and we're going to need artists, and all sorts of other skills. if we're going to take advantage of the economy that we see in space in the future.
Bob, Ryan?
Yeah, so policy naturally extends from the politics or the government relations that are already out there, and so this should be a natural extension from our already previous endeavors in the space station. For example, the space station has been extremely successful and sustainable, and if sustainability is a key aspect of what we're trying to achieve, then we need to have like-minded countries think together about how to explore together. And I think the moon is the perfect example of that. The first time NASA did it unsustainably. I mean, the Apollo program was amazing, but there are unused Saturn V rockets that are rusting out right now. I mean, the program ended, and that is not what we have for the future. We don't want that past to constrain us in thinking that we can't work together on a shared vision, shared goals. And what has happened with the space station as a good example is the ability to have redundant systems. You have resilience and risk reduction as a result of multiple partners being engaged on the architecture. So not only does it provide sustainability, provides resilience, it provides affordability as countries can participate and have the benefit of other nations investing in them, and it builds a geopolitical strategy that is of interest of the administrations to have those ties with other nations. So the benefits are almost too numerous to ignore.
I guess the one aspect I'd like to talk about with regard to sustainability is, to me, sustainability is not about stasis. It's not about staying in one place. It's about growth, right? So even though we're talking about sustainability, it has to be an exothermic reaction. There has to be more coming out of it than going into it. As we grow as a species, we're going to have more and more requirements. The moon and the resources of space can help fulfill those. So the idea of sustainability is to sustain our growth, to sustain our development, not just to stay in one place. And space is the leverage to allow us to do that.
Thank you, Eric. So maybe I can pose this question to you. Given the US leadership in space and NASA's international cooperation to form a base on the moon, an international base, what are the chances that the US could potentially join a coalition of nations in the coming decade to utilize space as a platform for peacemaking and conflict resolution beyond political boundaries, once we have that big base up there?
Thanks. Yes. So, as we understand, space provides that opportunity for collaboration. Now, of course, there's always the security aspects of space. We're well aware of the fact that there are nations and tensions that still exist internationally. But in general, the success of the civil space program has brought nations together. I mean, you talk about the collaborations between two former adversaries, like NASA and the US and the Soviet Republic, and now Russia. Those nations now have this technical community that really brings bonds together. And so there's opportunities for that in the future. Now, how many nations will be participating together in this endeavor will be as a result of the politics and that surround it. So we can't presuppose all those relations will materialize, but we can lean forward and use the medium of space as that inspiration that is across the world, a benefit to mankind as the mechanism for that. So it's definitely a diplomatic tool that we cannot ignore, because it will provide that opportunity.
Thank you.
So we're seeing stepping stones to the moon as well. I think I'm not going to make any big announcement here, but I think it's safe to say within the next 6 months to a year, we're going to see two companies that are going to be bringing people to suborbital space. How do you see this as a generator for the interest to the moon and what we can do beyond? Do you guys factor that in some of the policy and the thoughts for the markets? You could just be yes or no.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the commercial aspect of space is a paradigm shift for many of us who have worked in government for a long time. But the fact that there are multiple players now available to do these services is really changing the way we think about the affordability, the risk postures we're taking. So these will be the pathfinders for this, right? So the first time especially for launching the space station, will send crew on commercial rockets to the space station. That will be game changing. It would be, we use that word a lot, but it will be a big step, because we haven't really seen that taking from the robotic or cargo world to crew. So once we get comfortable with that, we will have a new way of dealing with these services. Now we're applying that also to the human lander system, and we're doing that intentionally because we know that giving companies a chance to innovate and compete with one another will really bring the best out of everyone. That's really the American way, is to allow folks to innovate and work that way. Doesn't mean that we don't give up on safety. Doesn't mean that we don't have standards that we apply. All those things are still true. But this is the opportunity next couple of years to really see that come to fruition and see how we will play that forward into every sphere of space exploration.
So Eric, I would say that data without human passion is just information, and it's about us going. It's about robots can provide us data, it provide us precursor knowledge. You could do a lot of prospecting, but not yet can they tell us how it feels. So we want to go. We humans, when we see humans going into space, and we can do that too, that's a great source of inspiration. Just look what happened this week with the first all-woman spacewalk. The whole world was watching. It's very inspirational when humans go to space. I know I want to go. The robots can go first, but I want to go later.
The talent piece of this is critical, as I said in my last response. And what we're really trying to do is to inspire a next generation to pursue things that will be done on the moon and beyond. This is absolutely critical, because when you look at the workforce trends, on the one hand, we're retiring an age of folks with space experience. On the other hand, we have a lot of competition for the young talent. I've used this example before, but in the Space Enterprise Summit, we had a couple of warning signals from folks that work routinely in the, say, 15 and below category. And their nervousness is that there are other competing areas beyond space. We're going to have to compete for that talent. We're going to have to inspire that talent and re-inspire it with the newer things we're going to do on the moon and beyond.
So as we walk around the convention hall and all around us, I had a funny experience earlier today. My colleague said, well, meet me at the lander, at the lunar lander. And I had to say, which one? Because so far, I think I've seen, just in a quick sweep through the building, I've seen 3 so far. In the last 5 years, my life has been pushing public-private partnerships. So as we see these private companies that are developing these vehicles, how, as agencies, how do we incorporate these best, and how can we push these public-private partnerships forward to achieve all our collective goals?
Well, from a NASA perspective, that's, again, it's sort of the underpinning on how we're approaching our lunar endeavors. And it's so important. And I think really the change that has occurred, and it's not like it's overnight, but over the last decade or so, is really the entrepreneurial, the investment by the private entities of their own skin in the game, because they have their own ideas about how to do things. It's funny, you were focusing on the 2 entities that are hopefully early in 2020 going to provide human crew capability. But there's other partners out there that are doing very similar things that may be other options too. So it's really important to remember the open architecture about it, and also that industry is investing their own dollars because they see the economic benefit and gain, and it really just makes all of the partnering much more easy.
This is fresh on my mind from this morning's workshop over at Commerce and the nature of public-private partnerships. What we're seeing is that the nature of government interactions in the market is changing. Historically, we heard of a reluctance, we heard of a concern that government entities would say, let's just wait and see if this becomes commercialized. This morning we heard about a much more proactive set of interactions by government agencies in the market, perhaps as small as just making seed investments in entrepreneurial companies. And again, that does a couple of things. One, it provides critical resources to the company for something that the government wants to pursue. but it also then allows the company to go into the capital markets to actually say, hey, the US government or any other government actually gave us this stamp of approval at a small level. Would you consider this as something that could be commercialized? And there's a wide range of responses to that, from this is probably a capability that will only be sold to the government for the next 30 years, to we do see a commercial viability for this capability over time, from a very increasingly sophisticated, from an increasingly sophisticated capital market and an insurance market behind it.
Just be real quick. Commercial lunar payload services, that is a game changer. I mean, it is something that, I mean, it's these small companies, these entrepreneurial companies are getting a chance to play in the big game, and it's going to be huge for both, you know, up and coming starting companies. I mean, you talk to these folks, and they're very small at this point, but they will become the giants of our new space age.
I just wanted to add that, you know, we talk about public-private partnerships. Can there be a chance also for nonprofits to be part of that mix, other than commercial space companies? And so we need to also divert attention towards the nonprofits who are working very hard in the industry to promote different, you know, aspects related to space.
Well, I think we're running out of time, but I think this is such a significant panel, because I think the representatives on this stage, from a nonprofit perspective, a couple here together, from a policy direction of where we're going as a nation, from the entrepreneurial spirit that's going to drive us to the promotional authority of the promotion of our Commerce Department, and the technology and the advancement and the experience that NASA brings. This is just the perfect combination of wrapping it all together, I think, to achieve our greater international goals as an international community, as well as a nation. So I want to thank my co-host, my co-partner here, Namira, for her generosity in putting all this together. And of course, I want to thank these fantastic panelists that we had, and thank you for all the hard work you're doing for our nation to achieve our national goals.
Thank you very much. It's just been so inspirational to discuss this all, and I'm so happy to see this room fill up. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for supporting us. I'm really proud of this audience. Thank you so much, everyone.